Republic under Stresemann. So after the hyperinflation and economic crisis of 1923, it was basically the Weimar Republic was basically on the verge of collapse, both socially and economically. And basically, it became clear to everyone, both within and outside of Germany, that it needed urgent action. So in August of 1923, a new government under Gustav Stresemann took over. And actually, the funny thing is, Stresemann only served as chancellor for 102 days, and he then became foreign minister, and he continued to dominate German politics until his death in 1929. And ironically, that's when the Great Depression happened and when the Weimar Republic started to fall apart. And Stresemann made some urgent changes in a frantic attempt to save the Republic. So, what were the changes under Stresemann? He called off the passive resistance in the Ruhr. He brought in the worthless marks, which was the German currency at the time. He burnt them and replaced them with the new currency, the Rentenmark. And he negotiated to receive American loans under the Dawes Plan. And he renegotiated reparations payments. And through the above, Germany's problems were solved very quickly. And so this is why some historians say that it was proof that Germany's problem wasn't as serious as made out to be by politicians at the time, because it was fixed so easily and in such little time by Stresemann. So key point. So Stresemann had helped to solve many of the issues caused by the crises of 1923, which led to an economic and political stability. But Germany became basically too reliant on loans from the U.S., which we will explore now. So some of the achievements of Stresemann: economy, the culture, the politics, and the foreign policy. But some failures of the Stresemann: the economy, the culture, the politics, and the foreign policy. Notice any similarities between the two? Some positives of the economy. So he ended hyperinflation and the economic crisis of 1923. In 1923, he brought in the worthless marks, burnt them, and replaced them with the Rentenmark. In 1924, the Dawes Plan was signed, which gave the Republic US loans of 800 million marks, reparations spread over more time. And in 1928, Germany achieved equal production to prior World War I levels, and it became the second strongest industrial power again, right after the US. Now, World War I ended in 1918, so in like 10 years, they managed to become the second strongest again, ahead of the UK, which is quite amazing. So money into the infrastructure, schools, apartments, and that created jobs. The money was from the US loans. And the wages rose for industrial workers, which also created a higher standard of living. And the reparations were actually finally paid. And in 1929, the Young Plan was signed, which reduced reparations. But whether or not this gets put into action will be explored later, because in 1929, as we all know, the Great Depression hits and the Wall Street crash, and that's when the Nazis start getting power, and what the Nazis feel about the reparations. Some negatives of the economy under Stresemann: the economic boom was precarious, meaning risky. It was like hanging on a thread. It was all dependent on the US loans, which could be withdrawn at short notice, foreshadowing something that happens in 1929. Inequality: main winners of the economic boom were the big businesses, the steel and chemical factories, who controlled approximately 50% of Germany's industrial production. The big landowners: so Berlin's land price increased by over 700%. They gained a lot. But however, the small businesses like the small peasant farmers and the middle class, they lost a lot. The farmers were overproducing as less food was needed post-war because there was lower demand, and smaller businesses were being threatened by large department stores, mainly being Jew-owned, which is foreshadowing something that Hitler does, because who does Hitler hate? The Jews. So how do you think he got the support of many Germans? Think about that. The culture. There was a cultural revival in Germany. On the left, we can see a picture of the nightlife in Germany, Weimar Republic. And during the Kaiser's time, it was almost a dictatorship with strict censorship. But with the new Weimar Constitution, it allowed for the freedom of free expression of ideas, kind of like the US, like freedom of speech. So the writers and artists flourished with modernist ideas and criticized politicians and their everyday life. Cinema and nightlife also became major pastimes. And people turned their backs on traditional values and became more modern, free of censorship. However, there were many negatives as well. This new Weimar culture was big and exciting in the big cities, right? But in rural conservative in the rural areas with conservative and elderly Germans, they were shocked by this like behavior in cities. Organizations such as the Wandervogel movement was a negative reaction to modernist ideas, which was the Weimar culture. They wanted a simple return to simple country values, and they wanted less decadence in towns. Now, decadence basically just means like moral cultural decline due to excess indulgence in luxury. So, what does that mean? It basically means like, say you got a new toy and you keep playing with it, and you go into the mud, and you keep playing with it, and you don't keep taking care of it. Eventually, the quality of that toy is going to decline, right? So the German people in the Weimar Republic, they were indulging themselves in luxury, in their pleasures too much, like going for the nightlife parties or stuff like that, and that created a moral decline. Some positives of the politics. As we all know, the politics finally became stable under Stresemann after 1923. There were no further attempted revolutions or coups after the Munich Putsch in 1923, which we will explore in the next video. But in summary, the Munich Putsch is just basically like a coup led by Hitler. The radical, that's supposed to say radical, the radical extreme Nazis and communists, they gained little support during this time, 1923 to 29, up to the start of the Great Depression. They gained little support, and modernist groups such as the Socialists, amongst others, they worked well together from 1924 to 29. However, there were many negatives too. Despite the apparent political stability of the Republic, both the communists and Nazis were building up their parties. And 30% of votes still went to these parties opposing the Republic. And more concerningly, the right-wing groups that posed the greatest threat, they were just being quiet. They weren't destroyed. And the Nazis began to collaborate with the right-wing Nationalist Party to appear a bit more respectable to the German public. And even more significantly, the national war hero Hindenburg was actually elected president in 1925, and he was opposed to democracy. Now, foreign policy. So in 1925, the Locarno treaties were signed, and that accepted Germany's western borders and proved that Germany was going to be a peaceful nation. They were accepted into the League of Nations in the following year, 1926. Stresemann worked to adjust some terms of the Versailles Treaty, so he removed the French and British and Belgian troops from Rhineland, and they reduced reparations payments through the Young Plan of 1929, which, does it happen or not? It gets signed, but does it actually happen? Some negatives of the foreign policy. The nationalists protested against Stresemann joining the League of Nations and for signing the Locarno treaties, because they saw it as an acceptance of the Versailles Treaty, because they're officially agreeing to everything that was signed in the Versailles Treaty, right? And the communists also hated the Locarno Pact because they saw it as a plot against the communist USSR government. Now, the Soviet Union at the time had a uprising, and Russia, had an uprising, and basically the Soviet Unions won the Civil War. So it was actually a communist USSR government at the time. And both the nationalists and the communists still hated the Locarno. So evaluation of everything, positives and downsides. So both the nationalists and the communists, they still hated the Weimar Republic. But at least they were being quiet, right? With no new revolutions after the Munich Putsch in 1923. The culture was a hit, but some grandmas hated it. So they started their Wandervogel movement. Maybe the economy wasn't as good as thought to be, but at least they weren't putting money off to pay off their debts anymore, right? And so overall, the Weimar managed to fix itself up from the disasters of World War I and 1923. So maybe things weren't too bad. Until the rise of Hitler in the next video. Thanks for watching this episode of Stuplained, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe and share with your friends.